Her laugh hit me like a jeweled slap, sharp, glittering, designed to leave no bruise. "Enjoying your $500,000 trust fund, Renee?" she purred, swirling a cube of ice in a glass expensive enough to pay a month of my mortgage. "What trust fund?" I asked, and I felt the chandelier's light harden on my skin like frost. Carla blinked at me, slow and feline. We were in the kitchen of the Buckhead house our parents bought when Daddy's contracting business first took off, the same kitchen I used to mop on Saturday mornings while Mama taught scales in the den. Now everything was colder, brighter, shinier. The marble island had been replaced with something that looked like glacier ice. Carla, my older sister, wore a white silk blouse that made her look like a beautiful ghost. "Oh," she said, "you didn't know?" And she laughed again, a sound that said she knew exactly what she was doing. I left before I shattered. Outside, the air smelled like rain and magnolia petals, with the faintest sting of asphalt heat. By the time I got home, that laugh had braided itself through my breathing. I tried to sleep. Couldn't. At 3 a.m., with the moon parked low and mean over the rooftops, I unlocked the metal box where I kept Daddy's letters. One smelled like old pipe tobacco and orange oil. "Never doubt your worth, baby girl," he'd written the week before his heart gave out. "I made sure you'll be all right." I called the lawyer he used, a man I hadn't spoken to in 2 decades. "James Preston," he answered, voice still a little velvet with Georgia drawl. "It's Renee," I said. "Did my father set up a trust for me?" The pause before his answer had weight. "Renee, yes. He said it so you'd receive distributions at 35. He cleared his throat. "I assumed you had. Your sister was the trustee. I am 55. I had never seen a dime. I hung up and sat very still in my dark kitchen, palms flat against the cheap laminate. I thought about all the years since Daddy died, the years where every unexpected bill nicked me to the bone, the nights I ate oatmeal for dinner and kept the lights low to shave dollars off the bill. The day Marcus's school trip cost what felt like the sun, and I pretended I was fine so he wouldn't feel poor. I thought of how many times Carla had smiled sadly at my shoes and said, "You know I'd help if I could, but things are tight right now," while the diamond on her finger flashed like a lighthouse. There are angers that are red, hot as skillet grease. They flare, burn, and go out. Then there is the kind that slides into you cool as a silver knife and sits there humming. Mine hummed. I called Marcus at dawn. He answered with a yawn and a rasp of stubble against the phone. "You okay, Ma?" "I'm fine," I said, and heard how thin it sounded. "I need you to meet me after work." I told him where, a quiet coffee shop with copper mugs and a wall of plants that looked like a jungle installed by a stylist. He listened while I laid it all out. The laugh, the letter, the lawyer. "You're telling me Aunt Carla's been sitting on $500,000 that Grandpa left you?" His voice cracked on the words $500,000, and I suddenly saw him again at 11, learning how to say million with his front teeth missing. "Yes?" He went quiet in that particular way my son does when he locks onto a problem like a hawk. "Okay," he said. "We're going to do this smart." We spent the afternoon calling every office where paper lives, the probate court, a title company where a friend of a friend owed Marcus a favor, the bank Daddy used to love because they gave him a free toaster with his first account. We learned a lot. We learned that Daddy had named Carla trustee when I was 21 because I was too carefree, his word, not mine. He meant I was stubborn and still painting on weekends and believed in miracles. We learned that a trust disperses when the beneficiary hits the stated age unless specific conditions intervene. We learned that, somehow, there were extension filings. We learned that those filings bore my signature. Except they didn't. Not mine. Forgery tastes like tin when you first realize it's been in your mouth for years. James found copies of the documents and sent scans, apologizing so many times I finally had to tell him to stop. The signature looked like a drunken version of my name. The date marched me backward to the year I was 35 when I was packing lunches at 5 a.m., driving my son to school, and watching my marriage come apart bolt by bolt like a chair you shouldn't sit on. I had no time to breathe, much less sign legal extensions to deprive myself of $500,000. I called Carla. Straight to voicemail. "We need to talk," I said. Today, she texted back a picture of her manicure, nude, almond-shaped, perfect. Under it, she wrote, "Busy." I sent her the scan. The typing dots blinked. "You're being dramatic," she wrote. "Daddy wanted oversight. Daddy wanted me to be okay," I said aloud to my empty kitchen. And then, because I could feel the knife-cool anger hum louder, I got up, showered, put on a navy wrap dress that made my waist look like it still remembered being 28, and went to work because rage might fuel you, but rent still wants cash. I am not the type of woman who wins by screaming. I learned a long time ago that some people only hear music when you hum it through their favorite speakers. Carla's speakers are money, reputation, and rooms where people pretend they don't stare, so I made a plan that sang. First thing, I found a forensic accountant, not the flashy kind. A woman named Gloria who wore sensible flats and had eyes like a hawk that'd seen empires rise and fall. We met in a discreet office that smelled like toner and rain. I slid the scans across her desk. She studied them, then looked up at me. "If your sister used your trust as a personal line of credit, we'll find the footprints." Next, I spoke to a friend from church, a paralegal who has a gift for filing things just so. She suggested a petition to compel accounting, a court order forcing a trustee to lay open the ledger like a body on a metal table. Finally, I bought a dress for the one place Carla always lowers her guard, the annual charity gala she chairs for a literacy nonprofit, the one that puts her picture in glossy magazines beside check writers and pastors. She calls it her good works. I knew better than to go in boots. I went in silk. I had 2 weeks to gather receipts. 2 weeks to let the cool hum sharpen into something I could aim. The days unfurled like ribbon. Gloria asked me for statements. I called banks and waited on hold listening to 13 versions of "Your call is important to us." Marcus stayed late every night after his shift at the auto shop, his fingers black with oil, scrolling through PDFs, naming all the shell companies like they were a new alphabet: CWM Holdings, Carla W. Morgan Consulting, Blue Magnolia Ventures. Payments marched from my trust to accounts that smelled like her perfume. The night before the gala, Gloria called me. "I can't give you legal advice," she said carefully, "but if I were you, I'd have these in your purse." She sent 5 annotated pages that made my stomach drop and rise at the same time. Transfers. Misallocated expenses, administrative fees that were the financial equivalent of a wink. It's not just unethical, it's illegal. When I looked up from the screen, my face felt different, like a mask had slid off. I saw myself in the hallway mirror, the silver at my temples, the steadiness around my mouth. Older, yes. Also steel. The gala looked like a jeweled aquarium. The ballroom glowed in gold and blue. Waiters flowed like a school of fish in tuxedos. A jazz trio sighed in the corner. Carla moved through the crowd with a practiced joy, collecting cheek kisses. A photographer's flash popped. She glittered. My sister has always glittered. I stepped into her orbit and watched surprise flicker and die behind her eyes. Then the smile clicked on. "Renee," she sang, "how wonderful." "Apparently I'd been enjoying my trust fund," I said softly, "so I thought I should show up and thank you for all that careful oversight." A handful of donors turned their heads. Carla touched my forearm, a warning. "This isn't the time. It's exactly the time." I kept my voice velveted. "I've learned how to build a scene without raising the volume. But don't worry, I brought party favors." I pulled out a slim envelope and slipped one copy to her, one to the board chair, one to a reporter who'd been complaining about budget shortfalls while the shrimp tower collapsed heat into the room. "Gloria," I called lightly across the floor, and my forensic accountant in an unassuming black dress lifted her hand. "In case anyone wants to see the math." Carla's smile cracked like sugar. "This is slander," she hissed. I tilted my head. "It's a petition to compel accounting." I let the words travel, watched how they landed. And these are preliminary findings from a forensic review. The court date is in 3 weeks. You'll have a chance to explain the management fees, the extensions I never signed. I let the last words hang like a perfume note. The transfers to CWM Holdings. You could feel the temperature change. Money is temperature. The board chair's face went thoughtful. The reporter's eyes went glittering. The pastor who always called my son Champ suddenly needed a drink. Carla's fingers dug into my arm. "You're disgusting." "No," I said. "I'm done." She wanted a scene, so I gave her one she couldn't control. I hugged her, cheek to cheek, the way Southern women do when they're saying, "I wish you joy, and also I will bury you." "We'll talk soon," I murmured, and felt her jaw go stone. The next morning, her lawyer left me a voicemail full of threat. I saved it. I went to work. I laughed with a receptionist about her granddaughter's first tooth. I sent Marcus a text with a picture of the sunrise over the parking lot, peach and apricot like it had been painted by someone showing off. Then I met Gloria and James in a narrow conference room where the AC was too cold. We filed. The petition went through. Carla's counsel tried to delay. The judge, a woman who looked like she'd worn her hair in braids to law school and dared anyone to say something, said no. "We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bring everything." Everything arrived in thick binders that thunked onto the table. The first time I saw all those pages, my stomach tight-roped, but then Gloria pointed, and the numbers made a map. Daddy left not just $500,000, but growth. He had built a trust that should have been $780,000 by now, if it had been stewarded, if it had been loved. Watching the balance shrink under Carla's management felt like looking at a garden that someone had salted. The day of the hearing, I wore the navy wrap dress again and Mama's pearls. Carla wore grief like a costume charcoal suit, hair in a soft chignon, lips the color of prayer. She put a hand over her heart when she spoke. "I only ever wanted to protect my sister," she said, voice trembling slightly. "She's always been artistic. Impulsive." I let her paint me that way. Then James stood and read Daddy's last letter to me, the one about Worth. You could feel the room shift. I told the judge about the night I couldn't afford both gas and groceries and chose groceries, about the way shame feels when it's wearing a clerk's face. I kept my voice even. I told the truth slowly so it would fit in every ear. Gloria explained the transfers. "A trustee may charge reasonable fees," she said, tapping the chart with a neat nail. "But these are neither reasonable nor properly documented. Funds were moved to entities wholly controlled by Mrs. Morgan. This," she tapped again, "is self-dealing." Carla's lawyer objected. The judge stared through him until his words dried up and fell to the floor like unwatered plants. By afternoon, the air tasted like rain coming. The judge called a recess. I sat on a bench in the hallway where old wood smelled like history and lemon oil, and I let my eyes close. For a minute, I saw Daddy's hands, rough, careful, capable of building, capable of breaking. I realized I was holding my breath and let it go. When the judge returned, she didn't look at anyone in particular. "Until a full accounting is completed and reviewed," she said, "the court orders an immediate freeze on all accounts related to the trust. The trustee is suspended. A neutral fiduciary will be appointed. Additionally, I am referring the matter to the district attorney for review." Carla made a sound that wasn't language. I didn't look at her. I looked at my shoes, at Mama's pearls, at the light pooling on the floorboards like a quiet blessing. Outside, the sky had cracked open. Rain fell like relief. Marcus wrapped me in a hug that lifted me off the ground. "Ma," he said into my hair, and his voice was full of a boy and a man at once, "you did it. We didn't stop there. I am too old to think a first victory is the last battle." Over the next weeks, the neutral fiduciary went through the ledgers like a woman combing snarls from hair. Gloria kept finding things. James kept filing papers that gathered into a castle. The district attorney called me into a room with fluorescent lights and offered me a chair with stuffing coming out of the seam. I'm not making promises, he said, but this smells wrong. Carla started calling friends the way a ship calls in favors from the tide. Some answered. Some let the call go to voicemail. Reputation has a way of knowing when you've been feeding it lies. One evening, when the cicadas were loud enough to sound like electricity, Carla came to my door. No makeup. No armor, just my sister, eyes the color of storms over the Chattahoochee, mouth pressed thin. I let her in because Mama raised me to offer water even to an enemy who shares your blood. She stood at my table and looked around my small place like she was learning a new language. I took it, she said, and the syllables fell heavy. I told myself you'd waste it. I told myself I was rescuing you from you. And then, it was just easy. She met my eyes. I don't know how to give back the time. You can't, I said, softer than I felt. But you can return the money. She laughed, a tired, wrecked thing. It's not all there. Then sell your diamonds, I said. Sell the second car. Sell your pride. She flinched at that last one. I'm sorry, she said, and I think she meant it, and I think it wasn't enough. Carla, you could have told me when I was 35. I would have built something. I would have breathed easier. You let me drown and then handed me a towel and asked me to admire the thread count. Her shoulders folded like a tent in a hard wind. What do you want from me? Nothing you don't owe, I said. Money back. Public apology. Cooperation with the fiduciary. And then I want you out of my way. She nodded once like a woman agreeing to lose. Then she left, and the quiet she took with her was the kind you only get after a storm has pulled the nails from a roof and finally wandered off. The final accounting said what we already knew. Of the money Daddy left me, $312,000 remained. The rest had been burned in the hearth of Carla's lifestyle charity tables that made her look holy, consulting fees that consulted nothing but her hunger. The court awarded me the remainder plus restitution to be paid via sale of assets. The DA pressed charges for breach of fiduciary duty and fraud. I didn't rejoice when I heard the words, plea deal. I didn't weep either. I am past weeping for her. When the check arrived, it looked unremarkable. Numbers in a row, a promise that would become rent and a roof repair, a trip I've owed myself for 20 years, seed money for the studio I've dreamed of since I was the girl with paint under her nails. I took it to the bank Daddy loved, the one that gave him the free toaster. The teller smiled at me with the kind of warmth you can't buy. Big day, she said. I nodded. Yes, I said, it is. I walked out into a sunset that tasted like peaches and rain. Marcus met me on the sidewalk and showed me a picture on his phone, his hands, clean for once, holding a set of keys. First bay is mine, he grinned. I'm going to call it Worthy Motors. You like it? I love it, I said, and felt something in my chest retie itself into a better knot. At home, I opened the window. The night smelled like cut grass and wet streets and the ghost of gardenias. I took down the metal box and reread Daddy's letter. Never doubt your worth, he had written, and I realized worth is not a number, it's the quiet you get to keep when you refuse to let someone else narrate your life. The phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, a journalist asking for comment, a board member inviting me to coffee to talk about the future. Gloria sending me a link to a class on small business bookkeeping because art and spreadsheets can be friends. I smiled. I could see the path line out, paint under my nails again, a studio with good light, a scholarship fund in Daddy's name for kids who swore they weren't numbers people, a bay at Worthy Motors where Marcus would fix the cars of women who budgeted every miracle. I thought about Carla one last time that night, the girl she had been, the woman she chose to become. I said a small prayer over both, then put the prayer in the air and let it go. Sometime after midnight, the rain stopped. The silence felt like crystal. I stood in it and listened to nothing at all, and in that nothing, I heard the sound I had been waiting to hear since the kitchen in Buckhead. The laugh in my head lost its edges and fell away. In its place was a steadier music, one Mama would have recognized. It sounded like hands on piano keys, like a brush dragging light across canvas, like an engine turning over on the first try. It sounded like a life unhidden, finally, and mine.